Hopeful in Victoria, my heart will sing Victoria. We will march past the dusty moors, shake off 1,000 wars, leaving not left alone. Victoria's home.
What more could one want in life? A country that embraces its citizens like a gentle mother. Victoria is one, if not the most powerful empire on Terra. A haven for all of those that seek a prosperous life. Sylach's, namely Jane Willow's, song couldn't portray the picture-perfect image of Victoria any better. A melody that embraces you within its grace. At least, that's what Victoria wants you to see. Shadow of a Dying Sun is a bitter title for what would happen to a once great empire within Arknight's second main story arc. This sun might at one point have been as bright as it sounds in Jane's episode, but it was surely never one without its darkness. Stormwatch is the opener towards a stage of far too many great opposing parties in the crisis of the empire. Oppression, hatred, atrocities and betrayals. The political struggles of this country would shake Terra forever to come. No one would escape its influence. And it all starts like many wars, slowly, building up over time, before a few little, seemingly insignificant puzzle pieces make a decision that would lead its entire picture to transform into a scene of destruction, revealing the true colors of the glorious Victoria. Jane Willow is one such insignificant seeming piece. As a guard of honor of the County Hillock barracks, her daily life was not an all too busy one, since this position is mainly for public appearance. This gave her the opportunity to help around several places in the city. One such place was the Regional Rhodes Island office, where she built a good relationship with the operators and helped them with tasks like medicine allocation. This connection is what would later provide her with the onboarding recommendations of the leading operator of the office to join Rhodes Island. Jane is a cheerful person, always providing a warm environment. This is reflected in her actions with her surroundings. The biggest point about Stormwatch is the conflict between Terrans and Victorians, but Jane never really noticed this conflict until it was too late. As such, her treatment of the Terran citizens was not different from that of Victorians. When Craig, a Terran boy, accidentally kicked a ball into the office, she returned it to him without much scolding, much to his surprise. Even the Rhodes office operators catch up on his initial fear towards Jane. She is aware that some of them are choosing to call themselves Terran, but to her, everybody is Victorian, as they are part of their country. This is also seen in her relationship with her Terran friend, Saoirse, who she treats normally, while Saoirse is conflicted about her being with the military, the party that oppresses them the most. She knows far more about the present and coming situation than Jane. She had enough of people she knows dying, but her position within the Spectre Forces community as an information middleman make her feel more and more guilty. So she gave Jane the information about the Spectre Forces banquet being held, hoping that she would be able to de-escalate a trend she feared from getting worse. Unfortunately, like established, Jane is rather naive towards the extent of the situation and what she just received. She gave this intel to, arguably, the better person Bagpipe, not knowing that this would be the decisive spark inflaming the County Hillock incident that Saoirse was so desperate to avoid. Jane herself would not know what this action of hers would set into motion. During the ensuing battles, she would get to know the harsh reality that is the deep rift between Terran citizens and the soldiers. She initially tried to also help Terrans, only for them to chase her away after they make her responsible as the Victorian that killed Saoirse by tipping off the military. Due to this, they even revoke her right to shed tears for her friend who she betrayed. Others don't even mourn her death at all, believing that as a traitor, she received her rightful punishment. Here is where Jane changed her mind for the first time. Her initial stance in all of this was that the Terran citizens were innocent, regarding the matters plaguing the military. A one-sided discrimination, so to say. But now? A kind soul has lost their life, in hopes of de-escalation, and many of them even shun her for this. They welcomed the brutal change Saoirse feared, so perhaps the Terrans are not at all that innocent. Her rage began to build up. Exactly at this point, Outcast dragged her to safety, trying to help her sort out her feelings in the process. She sees the hatred in her eyes, asking whether she sees herself on the Victorian side now. Jane is not sure whether she could stand on any side right now. She was not even sure of her own hatred, so how would she decide which side to support? All she wanted was to avoid bigger conflicts, and now she had become the beginning of it. Should she have been aware of these consequences? Outcast answers this with a story of her own. Once she was sent to arbitrate a war by request of a sieged city. She tried to bring the two sides together, succeeding in opening talks. They unfortunately failed though. Believing that she couldn't do more, Outcast left with a few citizens that weren't up for this war. Later that week, the city would be breached and everyone inside killed by the besiegers. Outcast thinks in the end she was on their side, since the city asked for help, but the only thing she did was make them believe that someone came for their rescue. Someone who would avoid them being massacred. Jane is quick on telling her she did good, and all that she could. But Outcast is not too sure. Could she have tried harder? Should she have seen this outcome coming, and at least not given the citizens a false sense of hope? Or should she have killed the besiegers directly to avoid further casualties? Jane asks whether this would not have just had other heavy consequences, which is exactly where Outcast wanted to go with this. No one can tell you the consequences of something before you do it. But still, are you telling me you'd stand by and watch? Just let evil happen over and over and over again? This leads to Jane not being depressed by her own action, leading to her friend's death anymore. Her intention was to make things better. The result is something that happened now, against her better judgment. This leads into the old debate of what should be valued higher, intention or result. Outcast's story could be told to the Spectre Force's soldiers, or the barracks, and they would be even more enticed to continue their operations in all their brutality. But that is anyways not the point of Outcast's explanation. She is extensively smart and empathetic, regardless of race. She knows how to steer a situation or person, and Jane needed exactly that kind of guidance she provided. Later that day, they would regroup with the Rhodes Island branch office, at which point the conflict and bombardment of the county had escalated much more. Outcast explains that the barracks are the ones responsible for the bombardment, something that visibly shocks Jane. They, the ones meant to protect the citizens, are the same that are spelling their demise. Jane can now see why the Terrans were so ready to support the Spectre Force. But in her eyes, the Spectre Force is not much different. They too are using innocent lives for their benefit. Having steeled her resolve from Outcast's story, Jane decides to help Rhodes Island in providing emergency care for those that are trapped between these opposing parties, the civilians. Maybe she might not be able to stop the war in front of her, but she is at least capable of alleviating the pain of those that suffer from it, just like Outcast did when she let the few citizens out of their city in her old story's conflict. Jane's position is of course vastly different. Her involvement in the current conflict is much larger, as she holds personal relationships with many of the citizens. Once she started helping them, some of the Spectre Force's soldiers noticed her when they were investigating the civilians while searching for Reed. They brandish her as a Victorian enemy, as her uniform and flag are of the military. She says though that she doesn't belong to them anymore. She is not the enemy because she stands on the opposite side, but because she is not going to let them harm the innocent. She might not be of the same descendants, but she has years of experience in the same city alongside them. It's not that she doesn't harbor hatred against them. They enabled the Spectre Force's entry, and are not without fault for Saoirse's death. They will have to live with the burden of what they did. That doesn't mean that they should be judged by the Spectre Force, the ones that pushed them actively into their choices. Symbolically, she then rips out a piece of a flag, the flag that belongs to the other evil in this war, and uses it as a bandage for the injured Craig, the boy she encountered at the beginning. Upon this, more and more injured Terran civilians stand up, ready to push back the soldiers that are harassing them. These few that witnessed Jane's compassion would be the minority though. After the end of the incident, most would not resist the Spectre Force, and so Jane would leave the county with Rhodes Island in face of this overwhelming hatred on the battlefield. Over the course of Stormwatch, Jane develops from a naive and protected maiden into a person who was confronted with reality. With a little bit of help from Outcast, she clearly formed her goal going forward: help those in need, especially in her home country. After joining Rhodes Island, she would return to Hillock after some time, where she would close the rift between Terran and Victorian survivors and help them build shelter, which shows her determination. It takes courage to accept your former misgivings. Sometimes reality is just far more brutal than one would expect, and Sailech would not be the only one who would have to learn this. Horn and her Tempest platoon were sent out to County Hillock to investigate the disappearance of some Originium goods. They were suspecting the Spectre Force of doing so. During their first operations, they were apprehending a Terran suspect who was visibly frightened by his Victorian capturers. The one most oblivious to this was Bagpipe. She is in general a less serious person most of the time, and her background fits into her being a kid from the countryside who never encountered much tragedy. Just like Jane, she is confused by the suspect's wording since he is Victorian too. In her eyes, the Terran people of Hillock are all normal people, scared they're arrested, mourning lost ones, and working to survive. But I don't want to focus much on Bagpipe. The much more interesting case and character is Horn, and the conflict she is entangled with, which makes her realize truths that might be even more harrowing than Jane's. First of all, do I find it at least questionable that Horn takes relatively long to get behind all of the racism going on, since her upbringing should have made her come into contact with this. But we'll get to that point later. After them capturing the Terran, he is escorted back to the barracks by the soldiers that were crashing their questioning on sight. Horn convinces them to take her and Bagpipe with them for questioning, since they have a valid reason in attending, considering their mission. Here is where Horn is letting her training shine through already. It's always good to harbor doubts in cases like these, so she lets the rest of her team investigate further undercover. This brings us to the first face-off between her and Hamilton. Ah yes, Hamilton, my beloved detestable war criminal. From their first meeting, which Horn already had troubles of even getting granted, he doesn't show a glimpse of courtesy. He asks Horn whether she would agree with him that one's background decides what kind of person one becomes. As she denies this, believing that one is able to choose one's future, Hamilton berates her for her ignorance that fits her status. Keep this in mind. The only thing he wants is to keep her out of any other of their affairs. Much to his annoyance, her position keeps him from outright kicking her out of the city. Horn would also never leave so soon, seeing as the suspect they captured has been executed without any evidence. Hamilton is quick to snort at her. His attitude towards the minority that the Terrans represent is already beyond saving. He is convinced of their guilt. He already lost soldiers to the Spectre Force, and he knows that all Terrans support the idea of them being their own country. To him, it's not even worth considering Horn's help. Her proper way of investigation and demeanor would lead them nowhere against an enemy that he believes to be collective. If that's gotten through your head, then kindly eject yourself from my office. I still have genuine work awaiting me. This summarizes Hamilton's attitude the best. He is doing the genuine work that helps Victoria. Horn is simply playing around. Judging from this encounter, Horn is likewise convinced that working together with Hamilton and the barracks will be neither achievable nor of great use. Additionally, is she getting suspicious of his actions, which are fueling the ensuing conflict. She knows that the pressure that is being placed on the ordinary Terrans could very well force them to taking up weapons, a disaster that would shake Victoria. Over the next days, this worry would only worsen. It's like everybody is just waiting for the first shot that signals the beginning of a war. From here on, Bagpipe would receive Jane's intel, and they would infiltrate the Terran party, where Horn would get to meet Seamus Williams, an inconspicuous Terran poet whose work is being used as a tool to rally up support, and who is treated as a hero by Terran civilians. Much to his pity, since this fact is being abused by wealthy Terrans and the Spectre Force. He realizes fast that Horn is neither Terran, nor is she here to offer support to the Spectre Force like most others. He doesn't snitch her though. He is merely exchanging thoughts with her. Horn is surprised about this, considering she is not Terran, and that any other response from Terrans the last days has been negative. To Seamus though, this makes their conversation even more worthwhile. It's not like anyone on the party is talking Terran anyways. He is a Victorian, one that has been raised in this country and thinks in Victorian. It would be funny to him to just go and change his everyday life so drastically by switching to Terran. That does not mean that he is not yearning for a revival of their culture. Seamus is the kind of person who just wants to incorporate his ancestors' traditions into their life without forsaking Victoria. The whole conflict in Hillock revolves about Terrans versus Victorians, when there is an obvious third option: both, something that Seamus would prefer. Horn relays to him that she worries about the Spectre Force enforcing this rapidly and much more radically. Seamus partially shares these worries. He knows that his work has helped this, but he is also humble enough to acknowledge that he is not one who can do something about this. He is merely giving people something to think about. In his words, he is planting feathers. What bird grows out of this is not up to him. Each person interprets this feather differently, and if this leads to conflict, then this is unfortunate, but likewise unfortunately out of his hands. This might not be something everyone agrees with. I also don't think that Horn would agree with this. But she does see a reasonable person within Seamus, someone who she can debate with and think about the future. Because of this, she thanks him for their truly pleasant chat. I wholeheartedly believe that, given the chance, he could have played a larger role within the Terran storyline. But as we know, he would never get the chance to. Hamilton would crash the party, and in the ensuing chaos, Seamus would lose his life, becoming the very spark that started the war. Even Horn laments his passing, wishing he could have died with a meaning more fitting for a man with a simple wish for recognition of his ancestry. Amidst all of this, Hamilton is not shy enough to berate Seamus. He quickly faces Horn again, thanking her for the one worthy contribution she provided them by being tailed, leading them to this gathering. He was certain that her worthless sympathy would lead her to try to establish more direct contact, something you could take advantage of. And Horn knows that with his involvement now, there isn't much she can do. Since their communications with the higher-ups in Londinium are disrupted, how terribly convenient, Hamilton is the highest-ranking officer, making it able for him to establish martial law in the county, giving him full control over the situation. Or so he thought. He sought to use the party as a way to sniff out the Spectre Force, but has in turn provided them with a perfect opportunity to enter the picture. The hall would be bombed. Many of the noble party attendees and soldiers would die. The Spectre Force had a reason to intervene, given the even harsher oppression enforced by Hamilton on the attendees and civilians. Hamilton, on the other hand, has a reason to hasten up his plans due to this attack. The war starts to fuel itself, escalating both sides respectively. After mourning Seamus for the 5 spare seconds she has, Horn and Bagpipe move to evacuate as they witness the Spectre Force killing all nobles that they gathered for support. They could leak intel if left alive. At this point, Horn starts to hasten herself. Her understanding of the situation behind the veil gets more and more clear. Victorian weapons used by the Spectre Force and an aristocratic meeting all point towards a powerful supporter behind them, something that would be proven correct later on. The one problem right now is that despite the Spectre Force's appearance, the originium goods that her platoon were investigating have still not surfaced. Just at that moment, Horn gets a call from her dying teammate that they found the goods at the barracks artilleries. Up until now, Horn was still willing to offer Hamilton with what she believed to be helpful advice. These apparently tipped him off though, that she has assistants in the county that is working in secret, something he couldn't allow, hence him giving the command to kill them on sight. Enraged by grief, Horn barges into the barracks, shouting at them to let her see Hamilton. And she will get what she wants. If her teammate cost them half of their men to kill, then she would take even more down with her, in case they wouldn't comply. Unfortunately, they have some of her compatriots as hostages, making her unable to resist and stop the barracks' ensuing bombardment of the city. After they were sufficiently set up in their operation, Horn is brought to Hamilton for their final debate. Hamilton doesn't even lose one word about him killing Horn's comrade. He is much too busy to revel in what he believes to be a sure victory by eradicating the Terrans. His men are reclaiming their city. Horn retaliates that even in case of their victory, Hamilton will have already brought Victoria a great defeat. It is a last-ditch effort of her to get through to him with the one thing that he seems to value, the glory of Victoria. Bombarding their own city, creating countless tragedies on both sides for what? But even that is not enough. To Hamilton, bloodshed is a given in a war. To pay some blood money to hasten the end of it is a virtue to him. Horn finally stops to try to persuade him. He did not prepare those originium bombs as a response to the Spectre Force. The preparations were started far before that. Hamilton tries to use them as an excuse for his actions, but it was always the Terran civilians that those bombs were meant for. What right does he have for his prejudice and hatred, ruining what Victoria has fought for over decades? Even though they call themselves differently, the Terrans are still Victorians, meant to receive the Empire's prosperity. This minority that they resemble might be small, but the fire they are able to start might very well burn all of Victoria down. These flames kindled today. How much innocent blood will it need to douse them? Hamilton does let her in on one detail she is missing in all of this. It's not solely his hatred, his persona that is trampling the Terrans. He has backing, very influential that is. This war he is fighting for began long ago. They don't want to simply destroy the Terrans in his sight. They seek to destroy their courage, their will to resist. If they wish to oppose Victoria, then they will become an example of what happens if you fight the Empire, for all of Terra to see. They will be the corpses that frighten Victoria's enemies. Horn knew that Hamilton is radical, but she never expected him to be this beyond saving. Seeing as there's nothing left for them to discuss, the last thing she swears on her comrade's death is that she will see him court-martialed. I love Hamilton. He is such a simple but immensely effective character. Just look at his arrogant posture. He never really responded to Horn's arguments. He simply doesn't need to. His position, his power and conviction give him no reason to think he would be in the wrong, or that any other approach would be more fitting. Nip the problem in the bud. even if that problem is a self-created one. All for the glory of Victoria. His atrocities and despicable actions are clearly of that nature, and if looked at from an extremely rational, or in his case biased viewpoint, he's actually very effective. The culling of Terence in his own barracks ranks, the killing of Horn's subordinate, and the bombardment of the city all struck the mark. Especially the last point is gruesomely smart. The bombs serve a double purpose in his plans. Firstly, do they accomplish their normal destructive impact. Whoever survives this finds themselves in ruins filled with active originium due to the stolen goods Hamilton incorporated in the bombs. Infection is more than likely in that case, making it easy for the barracks to isolate them after the war and eliminate them with an, on Terra, acceptable reason. This mindset of his carries over to many within the military. Before her capture, Horn told his adjutant Hill that Victoria is ashamed of him. Hill's only response is that the colonel has no need for Victoria's gratitude. It's unclear whether Hamilton's fanaticism stems from his childhood, Victorian propaganda, or his military education. Regardless, he reveres his country so much that he would do whatever without expecting any reward. This extremism is what made him oblivious to his demise, though. The power of Victoria made it impossible for him to imagine the victory of the Spectre Force, and more importantly, the betrayal of some of his most loyal men. His adjutant Hill defected to the Spectre Force. Hamilton might have his undying loyalty, others rather support whatever lets them live. Even in the eyes of his imminent death, Hamilton was unwilling to admit his defeat, believing in the insurmountable strength of the empire he is part of. And so he would adjust his uniform to make it as presentable as possible, and drew his saber. The sounds outside his door became ever so louder, until they would subside right before it. He knew that this was his moment to show his loyalty to what was his world. Rushing head-on into the enemies behind his door, he would shout, "My saber and I hail from Victoria." Hamilton got everything from Victoria, and he gave everything he had for it. Up until his very death, he never let go of his delusions, of his righteous path. He never left his blissful reality. One could almost be envious of such an end. Horn would never lose another word about Hamilton, but she would surely agree that his death was a far too lenient one. He symbolizes everything that she stands against as a soldier. Victoria has fought enough battles and created enough suffering. The least they can do is protect the ones under their care and resolve conflicts in a meaningful manner, if possible that is. Elitism and infighting is the least that they need. But that would be a whole nother thing for later. In their more pressing situation, as a last-ditch effort to get word out about the occurrences within Hillock, Horn and her team moved to the city's radio tower in hopes of using it. There it would be where Mandragora and her forces would wipe them out, announcing Dublinn to the world and forcing Horn to launch Bagpipe out of the city using her piledriver spear. Horn knows that Bagpipe is not the brightest candle on the cake, but she has her heart at the right place and is immensely capable. If it's her, then she will find a way to avoid more tragedies. Londinium will need her. This is fairly shocking to see. The platoon leader, who has been speaking with so much wisdom and resilience in this war, is forced to be ready to abandon her own life. What they lost is an entire platoon, except one person, and more importantly, they lost the initiative to the enemy. Despite all that she experienced, the atrocities of the military, the infighting behind the scenes, and the loss of her comrades, Horn never lost hope. Bagpipe would carry it on. Looking at this in retrospect is even more bitter. Londinium wouldn't even have the time to consider what happened within Hillock. Horn's actions would leave behind one thing, and one thing only: Bagpipe getting out of all of this alive. And oh boy, would that have an impact that Horn would never have expected on a whole different level? Horn's story could have easily ended here. An honorable and courageous soldier dying in the war that she hoped to prevent. Her position and power would be what makes her survive though. Survive to fight another day and redeem her convictions. A military drill gone wrong. This would be the only thing the public would be told about the County Hillock incident. The Spectre force has long left the site, leaving behind a scene of destruction that Victoria has to cover up. Fortunately, their propaganda is powerful enough to do so for now. And who would question this? Most of the Victorians continue to live their pleasant lives, or are far too busy to earn money to survive. The Victorian system is designed to keep people confined mentally, using them to the utmost efficiency. Just listen to Sailor's theme again. This is also shown within the 3 characters we talked about so far, including Jane. She stems from Sargonian ancestors, who went to Victoria and established their status in this, at the time, still open-minded country. Hard work would be rewarded. The price was to adapt to Victorian etiquette. Being well off, Jane received piano lessons and had to read a lot of books, becoming the kind woman with a hint of noble air around her. Something that led her to lead an easy life. This showed in her ignorance towards the racism within Hillock, as well as in her childhood. She once lent a bullied bakery girl some novels, believing that if she would read them and become more knowledgeable, she would be respected. As the girl gave her the novels back after some time, Jane would be mad at her for not having read them even once. She didn't even consider that, given the girl's background, she was unable to read. Her education to become a proper Victorian, the very education that benefited her so greatly, is the exact one that made her blind towards the inequality within Victoria. Horn has evidently not been entirely spared of this. Remember, Hamilton asked her whether she would agree with him that one's background decides what kind of person one becomes. Horn denied this, and Hamilton instantly pointed at her status and family. Her being a progeny from a high-up military-serving family would of course make her believe that one could become anything. Her family merely made this possible for her. Many others don't really have a choice. As much as I don't want to admit it, Hamilton has at least partially a point here. The same applies to Bagpipe, although she comes from a less well-off background. Over the course of the chapter, she mentions multiple times that they are all Victorians. Why should they fight? May God protect our blissfully innocent Bagpipe. It is made clear that she doesn't mean this as, hey, stop fighting, we have to work together despite our different ancestries. She isn't aware at all about these ancestral differences in the beginning. Education has failed Victoria in the worst way possible, by being guided into ignorance of anything that could harm or belittle Victoria. The same is true for Lingones, the once capital of Gaul until Victoria was part of its eradication. The history books only tell of their glory during this battle, not about the atrocities committed towards the Gaulish people during it. It's not until the flames of war are licking at your home that you really feel just how painful it is. It is high time that Victoria is paying the price for their misgivings. Unfortunately, it's the common folk that has to bear the brunt of this the most. Already the aftermath of Hillock would see some of them suffering dearly. One of the surviving soldiers who got infected after the incident and had to survive in the ruins now has an extremely warped perception of his plight. He knows that them not getting noticed before the bombs started to rain down so that they could evacuate was likely not a mistake. His only response to this is that it would be hard to pull out some weeds without destroying some crops too. Even in their darkest hour, some Victorians don't even hold a grudge against the military. The rift that has been widened in his heart runs deep. Deep enough to numb him of holding anything against Victoria. It's the Terrans that are at fault after all. If only this would have been the full extent of the Victorian elite's abuse of power. But this would be far from being the only thing that they would do. Victoria is not the only one that is using her citizens like pieces on a chessboard. Dublin is standing before a warmed-up seat of chances. So much is in their favor. Not even mentioning the mysterious leader at that time, they already held strong cards. A powerful backer, the moment of surprise, a military corps of highly skilled personnel, and an army that is desperate enough to take up arms. It all began with unequal payment in comparison with their Victorian work colleagues. More and more differentiation was established between them. They got isolated, humiliated, and lastly even killed. It's not hard to understand why many tyrants choose to either join or support Dublin. Dublin simply would need to hand them a possibility, a hope, and they would be more than happy to sacrifice themselves for their cause. Few like Kelly or Saoirse would choose to not help them. The force that Hamilton answered with wouldn't hinder their resolve at all. Quite the opposite. Throughout the battles, their forces wouldn't dwindle. Sheer numbers were able to overwhelm an entire barracks worth of soldiers. The face of this full-on support is clearly Mandragora. A lunatic face, that is. Her first appearance would not even try to hide her true colors. Burn the city down and show Victoria's vulnerability and true face. With their might, they will hardly stop at Hillock. Tara would spam the entirety of this country, including Londinium. If that is not proof enough of how far Mandragora is ready to go, then her actions would speak more than her words. She was present as Reed had to execute Saoirse for her betrayal. It was her words that pushed Reed. Dublin has no use for traitors that were not willing to follow their noble cause. She detested Reed for wavering, a simple stand-in that couldn't even do the obvious. She would have played that part much better. Executing Saoirse was as natural to her as breathing, all for the leader. Her undying loyalty is what makes her the best soldier, while her arts support her brutal and sadistic nature. She doesn't hate the Victorian army. It's Victoria as a whole that she detests. Those that have power and think it's their right to trample on the Terrans. This includes those that enable Victoria on this path. People like Horn. Because of this, she visibly enjoyed ridiculing her in her defeat. Horn's trust and loyalty in Victoria have made her blind towards the abandonment that she got. Division and betrayal brought her to her knees. How fitting to see her become a sacrificial pawn for her country. The irony of these statements is something that Mandragora would later have to pay dearly in Londinium. If the whole of Dublin would be like Mandragora, they would be like a flare. Burning bright, but gone after a short while. Their leadership is much smarter than that, especially Harmonie. She has a hang for words. Having undergone the same training as Horn in her squad, Harmonie leaned into the intel gathering courses later on, visibly so. Her wording during interactions is clearly directed towards certain purposes. During her talks with Mandragora, Harmonie always finds the right way to calm her down a bit, holding her at a line that doesn't make Mandragora cross her allocated use. It's no wonder that Harmonie is so high up in the ranks, disregarding her former position. Her capabilities speak for themselves. Her information network is astonishing in a situation that is as chaotic as Hillock is. Not only did she know about Horn's team working undercover, she was even aware of the disappearance of Reed during the war. She would have already planned for the disposal of those in Dublin that were responsible for this, but someone took that work of hers, much to her delight. This disposal is another remarkable example of foreshadowing that would take place much later. She understands the intent of the leader better than anybody else. Perhaps her Victorian training is what makes her execute this so effectively. They are not the only ones that mastered propaganda. In their county-wide broadcast at the end, Harmonie proclaimed the atrocities that the military has committed within Hillock. The Terrans are made the poor minority that was oppressed, which, to be fair, they are. Their new ally, Dublin, was forced to act under these circumstances to end the suffering of their people, calling everyone who desires to join them. They establish a classic victim-oppressor story. The actions clearly tell, though, that many of the upper echelon's intentions aren't as pure as they make it sound. To make their whole story more believable, Harmonie commands their soldiers to also act as they proclaim at the end of the battles. Civilians are to be left in peace. The thing they would need the most after this orchestrated disaster is assistance. Everything else will naturally flow from there. The barracks ignited a fire. Dublinn merely sought to extinguish it. It's ironic how much Hamilton turned out to play into his enemy's plan. But who would have known that one of their own trained officers, not even a Terran one, would help to increase their ongoing problems? The interesting thing about Harmonie here is that she is somewhat of a neutral evil. Her own ambition doesn't lie in anything like revenge, hatred, or justice for the suffering. In her eyes, order always collapses at one point. It's what history books taught her. Her interest lies in seeing people struggle within this collapse and rebuilding of order. How do they face the burden of their actions and the knowledge that what they fight for is oh so fleeting? The leader is a special case here, since Harmonie is aware of her powers of using death, a new variable to her questions. How will the leader's order look after it has been established? To witness this, Harmonie uses whatever means are necessary, no matter the moral implications behind them. Manipulation? Well, her training has anyways numbed her to any guilt of that long ago. Condemning other people to death during the war? Their free will, their free actions, their consequences. Any other unfortunate civilians caught up in this? She doesn't even lose a word about them, besides Dublinn being able to use their fates for their benefit. She is a very suitable piece on the political chessboard, one that she is aware of being used on. But she is more than just a piece. She is also a player, one that understands their every move. So what about this move? Unlike Mandragora, who already dreams of Tara taking over the whole of Victoria, Harmonie knows that they will soon vanish again. Taking over Hillock would only mean painting a huge target on their backs, one that any duke could easily hit at this point. No, their current task is to kindle the flames of conflict and unrest, strengthen their forces, and weaken Victoria's. Time is all they need now. The looming of another crisis on the horizon will present them with the perfect opportunity. Neither was this a big impact nor a large-scale part of their campaign. This was merely the beginning. And while this is the beginning of a new story, it also is the end of another one. First impressions are crucial for characters. They form an image of that person within our minds. Outcast might have one of the most likable introductions you could imagine. Think of yourself at work, slacking off just a smidge. You and your co-workers enjoy yourself, as suddenly, one of the boss's top women appears behind you, seemingly out of nowhere. Surely you would be startled, desperate to find an excuse for the current situation she is seeing. The best outcome that everyone dreams of in these cases is for them to either ignore or brush it off. Outcast goes further. Not only does she not remind the operators of their work, she even joins in a joking manner. She too wants to taste their fine black tea with milk and that delicious pie when she already is in Victoria. Whoever deals cards in their next round might even want a Sancta blessing of hers for good luck. This instantly paints a character of familiarity. Someone who seems to be there with them all the time, playing the same game with them. Outcast has a hand for making anyone feel more comfortable in whatever situation. Her kindness and empathy stretch over that of most Sancta. This kind and easygoing nature of hers doesn't mean that she is any less capable or diligent though. Her task in coming to Hillock is to gauge the situation before the landship enters the vicinity. They need more intel about Victoria in its current situation, and Outcast is just one of a couple who were sent out to do so. And they could not have chosen a more capable elite operator. She knows much about the current social standings within Victoria and Hillock, much more so than any of the Victorians. This county is almost too normal and plain, a good spot to hide in plain sight. I doubt that they knew what situation Hillock is in exactly. Outcast specifically being here is more of a coincidence. Once she arrived, her suspicions were fast to grow though. She quickly noticed the plight of the Terrans that all the others were missing. More importantly though, is she aware of the dangers this holds. The Terrans, bound by heredity, are being used by someone. The brief time she had been here was enough for her to get to know all of this already. In her eyes, Victoria will also not sit by idly. Her remark of going out to see more of the city before it gets drowned under dirty rain shows her detailed understanding of the possible happenings. This opens an interesting conundrum. Outcast knows that things are pressing, but she never presses anyone. Until the war began, she only ever worked on her own. Is this because she knows that her co-workers can't change things? Is it because she can't change things and is only capable of getting intel? Or is it because this is not a situation for her to interfere with? All of the elite operators are so interesting because their personalities, and especially in Outcast's case, their experiences, make them tackle situations in their own ways. Ones that are rarely plausible or easy to understand at first glance. Her role in all of this is unknown, maybe because she never had one to begin with. She feels like a dedicated foreshadower and mentor to many within this chapter. Jane, Reed, the Hillock operators, and even Bagpipe are all getting some word of advice or something to think about from her. Something that is supposedly shaping them, even if just a little. Jane was evidently guided by her, partially because she went through something that Outcast can relate to. She herself woke up from a dream about her home country. Giving Jane the courage to go on with this was Outcast's gift to her. It's this ability of hers to read people and situations extremely accurately that make her so astonishing as well as fearsome. It's an ability that she never mentions or brags about. It's a very subtle detail that makes her such a respectable elite operator. Any kind of company, like Rhodes Island, has their public appearance. When it comes down to the detailed level, this image has to be held up by individuals that carry this group onwards. The elite operators are exactly part of that. Their own ideals and convictions are resembled within Rhodes, making it able for them to push forward in its name. These convictions are also what make them break rules sometimes. As the battle within County Hillock escalated further, one lonely soul has been heavily injured and infected within this war. The Rhodes operators identify her as one of Dublin's central figures. Doubt kept them from aiding to her rescue. There are too many uncertainties. She might even be one that killed many soldiers or civilians alike. Outcast is currently not the operator in command here, but her convictions hold true. While her colleagues see a power struggle tied to this infected, she only sees that. An infected. One that might very well be about to be thrown into the abyss of this war surrounding her. One that she might die in anyways. To Outcast though, this is just a possibility. First and foremost, she's someone that Rhodes vowed to assist. Whatever comes after, comes after. So she moved into the active war zone to rescue someone that her former self likely would have abandoned, just like the others are swaying to. It's at this point that it seems like an Argnets event always has one of two things. An amazing character, or an amazing mono or dialogue. This time, Outcast ticks both of these boxes at the same time. As she arrives at Reed, she tells her about her thoughts. Reed's face doesn't only tell her her race, it also lets Outcast read her like a book. Reed is at first very wary about her rescuer, which soon fades into relief once she got told about her severe condition. Relief not out of a sense of receiving help, but one stemming from an inability to be able to resist. Outcast is able to detect the pain of Reed, the one of a person who has been forced into a position they didn't want. Reed had to act a certain way. She had no other choice. Her body not allowing her to do so anymore gives her a chance to stop doing that. But who put her into this position? The rich? The powerful? Or those that seek to bring back Tara? But Outcast looks beyond these, to her obvious suspect. She sees Reed as a puppet. Her conclusion leads her to another kin of Reed. Judging solely by her faint and fearful reactions, Outcast knows that she is right. She is even able to arrive at the point that whoever is behind Reed has been used by Victorians on which she turned the tables. This is an exceptional display of not only knowledge about Victorian politics, it is also one of being able to accurately adjust one's information with what little reactions Reed has. Regardless of this position that Reed holds, Outcast tells her that she doesn't care for now. Just like many out there, is she currently a person in need of help. She doesn't mince her words though. She tells her that her life is going to drastically change. The trust of her followers has anyways been shaky at best. Infection will not make this any better. Again, instead of showing despair in the face of this reality, Reed's face shows her relief. Relief at having escaped her foregone role, albeit at the price of apathy. In Outcast's eyes, this is an unachievable hope. Her intuition tells her that Reed is more than just a simple pawn. So she makes a gamble. Her task was to provide Rhodes with valuable intel. What she's gonna do is give them a card they didn't even know existed by bringing her to them. I gotta be honest, this is one of the craziest foreshadowings Arknights has. It would take almost 3.5 years before everything that Outcast predicted in this one scene came true. Her deductive abilities were astonishing to see when Stormwatch released. It's even more astounding to know that all of this was correct. Having a villain themselves, or a narrator foreshadow events, is one thing. It's another story if the foreshadower is someone completely unrelated to the happenings. An Outcast is someone I believe was capable of that. Her whole appearance, her past, and her every actions that fit every given situation like a perfect puzzle piece all paint her as an extremely keen person. It's almost ironic that the person who is able to read the atmosphere of situations the best is a Sanctor. And this wasn't limited to only other people. Outcast was more than aware of her own position as well. She knew she was lucky when she encountered Bagpipe, who she could entrust Reed with to ensure that she would make it back. The obstacle before her would have otherwise given her more troubles. Entrusting Bagpipe with the hidden message that she wouldn't come back, she went to face the elite soldiers of Dublin. And she did so in a very characteristic fashion. Not only did she not lose her humorous grit in her talk with them, she even laid out all the knowledge she had about her opponents. Loading her revolver with a 6th bullet, she reminisces about why she never did that. Calcid was the one who made her abide by a covenant that was controlled by the law. A covenant that forbid her from ever using a 6th bullet in her revolver. Her past sins weigh heavy on her. The judgments she passed were ones that she always did without wavering, but she knew that she would be the last one in the end to be judged herself. Whether this judgment stems from her not being content with some of her judgments, or lamenting that her judgments were not perfect solutions that satisfied her is up for discussion. In any way, Outcast was more than ready to accept the fate that she approved of herself, even when others wouldn't. Killing the 6 elite soldiers with her revolver in an instant, Outcast stands still, awaiting the foregone conclusion. In accordance with her breaking the covenant, the law punishes her by reducing her to ashes in a brilliant light. A light that would be seen by everyone within Hillock. A light of a road that has reached the end of the tunnel. To Outcast, this road was always meant to end like this. Outcast was a mentor to many, and a good friend to those that were close to her. Misery is the one who would be most visibly shaken by this. To him, losing Outcast doesn't just mean losing a friend. It's also striking a sense of dread into him. It needs a lot to kill Outcast. Whatever was able to do so won't just stop at her. Time is running, and it already cost them one of their most capable and honored. This beginning of Arknight's Act 2 is amazing in retrospect. At its release, Stormwatch's end was very open with not many specifics where this would go. Surely Dublinn is gonna play a main role in all of this, just like another well-established dragon, right? Now, here's where Chapter 9 is getting strange. While it does prepare a lot for Arc 2 with these parties, it prepares more of the internal Victorian struggles between it and Tara, something that is more heavily covered in side stories. There is this distinct cut between Chapter 9 and 10 that felt weird at first. Stormwatch seemingly didn't do much of imminent effect. Some of it would even be rendered sunder in the very next chapter. Only time showed how foreshadowing can also look. Victorian elitarism, the Terran conflict, and the looming self-destruction of Victoria. Arc 2 is much more than just the main chapters, so it only makes sense that Stormwatch as its opener is about more than just preparing these chapters. And it would only be that, a beginning. One that is only the start of betrayals, atrocities, hopes and despairs. The build-up for Arknight's greatest war.